This is 1.2 data classification. There's a lot going on in this section, so you definitely want to use your flashcards. So data sets, we have two different kinds of data. We have qualitative, which consists of attributes, labels, or non-numerical entries. I'm going to show you lots of examples in just a minute. And then we have quantitative data that consists of, numerical measurements or counts. All right, so qualitative data, again, is attributes, labels, or non-numerical entries. And so I've got a couple flashcards here for you. That would be colors, red, blue, and green. So it might be colors of a team's jersey. It could be colors of someone's hair. Could be sports, baseball, football, soccer. So these are labels. Even if they're numbers, they could be numbers like a house number, which is not really a measurement or a count. It's just a number on a house, right? So those are qualitative data. For quantitative data, can be all kinds of things, but it could be dollars, ages, weight, height, all kinds of, it could be your income, lots of examples. So these flashcards are set up so that you could make them if you want. On one side of the index card, you would put the qualitative data, the words qualitative data. On the other side, put a few examples. They don't have to be my examples. You can put your own examples on there. For the next index card, you would put quantitative data on one side, those words, and then on the other side, again, put some examples. So I know this is small, but let's take a look. We have a table that's showing us sports-related head injuries treated in U.S. emergency rooms. It doesn't tell us what year this is, but this is data from the BMC Emergency Medicine for a recent 5-year span. Okay, so each sport is listed, and then how many head injuries were treated. I noticed there's no equestrian on there. That would be high up there also. All right, so for the sport, these are words, right? So that would be qualitative data. For the head injuries, these are actually counts. And so those would be quantitative data. All right, so here's the problem I was telling you about address. I like to argue this one, but I kind of like to argue problems sometimes. So an address is really going to be qualitative. My argument is, well, we put all the odds on one side of the street and evens on the other, so we're kind of doing something numerical, but that we're not going to go there. So for the homework, for the address, they want it to be qualitative. Same thing for the street number. If they only give you the street number, it's still qualitative. Okay, but if they ask you the age of your teacher, oh my goodness, don't do that. But if we're looking at ages, that's going to be quantitative. All right, more vocabulary here. So again, we're going to set up flashcards. For nominal level of measurement, we're going to call it nominal data on our flashcard. These are only qualitative. And so to me, nominal kind of sounds like names, right? So these are names, labels, or qualities. It's not numbers that we're going to compute. So we could use like the numbers from a house because we're not going to compute those numbers. What bugs me a little is it says no order. So houses kind of are. But again, I'm being argumentative. So let's not go there. So we've got nominal data is only going to be qualitative. So that would be like our sports, right, that we listed on that last data table. Okay, then we have what we call ordinal data. For ordinal data, this can be either qualitative or quantitative, but it has to be able to be arranged in order. So we could say that those sports, because they were arranged in order of how many head injuries, we could say that that's ordinal. If we took the names of teams and their rankings, in a season. That would be ordinal data because they're ranked in order by how many games they won. Right, so those last flashcards were giving you the definition of nominal and ordinal. This one's going to give you examples. So what my class last semester did with the flashcards is they created these in class. If you're an online student, you may be making them on your own, but we had index cards, and that helped them as they went through the homework. They spread them out. As they went through their quizzes, they spread these out. So with this one, we're going to have nominal data on one side. On the other side, we have some examples. So gender, hair color, religious preference, the type of living arrangements. You can add your own, but those are just kind of examples of nominal data. And then for the next index card, we're going to have ordinal data. And again, this is examples. So as I said, football teams ranked in the league, top 5 earning movies, scales of satisfaction. We get those all the time in surveys of whether you're very satisfied, somewhat neutral, not satisfied. That's all ordinal data. Okay, let's take a look here. We have number 1, we have top 5 U.S. occupations with the most job growth projected for 2024. We have personal care aides, registered nurses, home health aides, combined food prep and serving workers, and retail salesmen. For number 2, we have movie genres. So action, adventure, comedy, drama, horror. All right, so let's look at this first one. This first table, it says top 5. So these are ranked, right? They're in order. So since they're in order, we're going to say that they're ordinal. Right? This is ordinal data because they're ranked. All right, for the second one, technically they're alphabetical, but that's not what they mean when they say order. This is not saying the top 5 kinds of movies that people like to watch. There's no information to let us know that it's in any way ranked. So we're just going to say that this is nominal data. All right, so let's try 2 more. Number 1 is the final standings for the Pacific Division of the National Basketball Association. Okay, well, the final standings means that we're looking at how many games they won. So this is going to be ordinal, right? Because they're ranked. A collection of phone numbers. Now, I know they're numbers, but they don't have any numerical meaning, right? Phone numbers, you're not going to subtract phone numbers. You're not going to compare phone numbers. They're not ranked. And so these are going to be nominal. Okay, here's the 2 tricky ones. You definitely want some flashcards for this. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways that we can look at this. So the first one is interval data. So interval data can be put in order, but there's actually meaning to the differences. So this would be looking at dates, like years, like looking at 1980 versus 1990. That has numerical significance, right? They're 10 years apart. So with those years, we're not going to, even if they're in order, we're not going to say that they're ordinal because we can compare them. Now we have this, what we call a true zero, or not a true zero. So being inherent or not being inherent. So I'm going to show you that on the next page and show you what I mean. But what happens is, if the data also has negative numbers or numbers on the left-hand side of 0, then it's going to be interval data. If there is nothing less than 0, so there's nothing on the left-hand side of the number line, then that is going to be ratio data. So it's very similar to interval, but 0 really means 0 for ratio data. So give me a minute. I'm going to show you some examples and it will make more sense. Okay, so with interval data, we have some different examples, right? Temperature can be negative or be positive, right? So we could have a temperature of 0, but we also can have a temperature of -10. I don't want to live there, but we do have that, right? We have places where it gets very cold. Or we could have a temperature over here at 30 or way up here at 97 like we had yesterday. So the point is we have numbers on both sides of 0, right? 0 doesn't mean that we don't have a temperature. We have a temperature, but the temperature is 0 on the scale of things, right? The same thing's going to happen with years. So we had a year 0. Now we're way out here at the year 2020. We didn't technically have negative years, but we had BC years, right? Now we have AD, we had BC. And so we actually did have years over here on the left-hand side of 0, going way back to when the Earth began. Okay, so 0 does not mean that there was no year. It just means that is the year 0. That's where we started counting again. Elevation is the same way. We have above and below. So the point is that for interval data, you can have data on either side of 0, and 0 doesn't mean none. Okay, ratio is a whole nother story. So let's look at ratio. Ratio is like weight, height, blood pressure, pulse. We cannot have negative weight, right? You can't weigh -5 pounds. You have to weigh something. Same with height, same with blood pressure, pulse. So my example, what I like to use is, all right, so we have pulse. Let's see, when I was driving this morning, my pulse was probably up at 100, getting aggravated. But our pulse ranges usually between 70 and 100. If we go down to 0 for our pulse, we're dead, right? 0 means 0. 0 means we're dead. And there is no way you can have a negative pulse. You can't have negative pulse. You can't have negative blood pressure. So a 0 really means 0. A 0 means you don't exist, with weight or height. With blood pressure or pulse, it means there's something bad going on if you have a 0 pulse. So it's what we call an inherent 0. And the way I remember this is because ratio has a 0 in it, right? At the end, technically, that O. And that's how, because it's tough to remember these two. But that's why your flashcards will help. If you want to write the number lines on the flashcards as well, that would certainly help. All right, let's take a look at this first table. It says New York Yankees World Series victories. So these are in years, right? This table on the top. They're years. They're not really ranked per se. I know they're in order of when they happened, but they're not really talking about a rank. They are quantitative because we could subtract them, right? We could subtract the first year that they had a victory from the last year they had a victory and see what the time span was. So we are going to say that these are quantitative data, but we're not going to say ordinal. We are going to say interval because a 0 is not a true 0 with years. So with years, you're going to always be interval when you're talking about the year like 1990 or 1923. And that's because we can have years before 0. So remember on the number line. Okay. Then let's look at this second chart. So on the second chart, we have 2016 American League home run totals by team. Okay, so we have the teams here, not necessarily ranked, just listed out. So those are actually qualitative data, right, or nominal. But here they have the number of home runs. Well, that's definitely quantitative. We could compare those. We could say one team has, 50 more home runs than the other. We could compare them as far as looking percentage-wise. And the other thing is that when you start to look between interval and ratio, if you have 0 home runs, you have 0 home runs, right? Zeros really means none. There's no such thing as a negative home run. So therefore, 0 is a true 0. And whoops, we're going to grab ratio that technically has a 0 in the word, right? That's that O on the end. Okay, let's look at 2 more here. 1, the body temperatures of an athlete during an exercise session. Okay, these are in degrees Fahrenheit. So degrees are always going to be interval because 0 does not mean we don't have any temperature. You still have a temperature, even if your body is at 0 degrees. You're frozen, but you still have a temperature, and you could even go into the negatives. So temperatures are going to always be interval. Now, number 2 is heart rates. So the heart rate in beats per minute of an athlete during an exercise session. So heart rates, we can't have a negative, right? You can't have negative beats per minute. A 0 really means 0. It means you don't have a heart rate and you have a problem. So heart rate is going to be ratio. Okay, let's look at a few examples. So these are the lengths in inches of a sample of species of fish caught in the waters of a region. They are not ranked. They could be ranked, but they're not ranked. So we're not going to worry about that. They're not words. They really are numbers. We could compare them, right? We could put them in order and compare the smallest fish to the largest fish. So what do we have left? We have to decide between interval and ratio. Well, you can't have negative lengths of a fish, right? If you have 0, you don't have a fish because fish can't be 0 inches. Therefore, this is going to be ratio, right? 0 means none. Okay, on the number line, you would have the 0 here. You would have fish's lengths this direction, but you cannot have negative. All right, these are the years that your college football team won a championship. So we've got the years listed. Technically, they're in order, but they're not. There's no real reason for the order. They're not ranked, right? They're not. We're not going to say that they're nominal because we could compare them. We could compare the first time they won a championship to the last time, or we can look at the spacing in between. So they're not nominal. We're not going to say ordinal because they're technically not ranked per se. And then years are going to be interval because remember, 0 is still a year. It doesn't mean that there's no year, right? Because on the number line for years, you've got 0 here. You have years this way. And then we also have years this way. And so these are intervals, and the year 0 does not mean none. And therefore, these are interval. All right, let's take a look at these. So I know they have all 4 types, so I might have to go to that to figure out what we have here. Okay, so what is the level of measurement for age? Right, well, age, we can't have negative age, right? If you're 0, you're 0. You haven't been born yet, or you've just been born if you're age 0. So since we can't have negative, it's going to be ratio, right? If you're 0, you can't have negative, but you can have age this way. Okay, what is the level of measurement for the pain level scored 0 to 10? Okay, so 0 to 10, that means we're ranking these, right? You are ranking your pain. Therefore, this is going to be ordinal. Okay, then we go to what is the level of measurement for marital status? So you're either married or you're not. These are words. right? And so that would be nominal. And then finally, what is the level of measurement for temperature? So remember, even though we technically, it would be bad news if we had 0 or if we had negative temperature, but we could. 0 doesn't mean no temperature. You still have a temperature, it's just 0 degrees. If you get even colder, it's negative degrees. Okay, so temperature is always going to be interval. I know these are a little tricky, but try the homework. Try if you use your flashcards with examples and make more flashcards with more examples if that helps.